Welcome back to The Road Forward, a podcast for trucking industry leaders, brought to you by TruckSpy, the all-in-one fleet management platform built to empower your drivers to be productive, compliant, and safe. We got episode 38 of the pod, and of course, we have Matt and Flint. Matt, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Matt, I've asked you, how are you the three weeks in a row first. At this point, you should be expecting it. And then, Flint, how are you doing?
I'm living the dream as always. Look, I'm episode 38. It's crazy. So my little brother was telling me on the phone over the weekend, he was thinking about starting a podcast or something. I don't know. And he said he read some stat, 85% of podcasts don't make it past episode 2. So we are by far the outlier in the podcast creation world, which is kind of cool. So good work.
Perseverance, baby.
Yeah, that's I saw something similar to that. Like if you make it past 9, then you are doing A-okay. So if you're enjoying the pod and you want us to continue, I guess hit the like, right? I mean, we're going to continue no matter what. Let's be honest. But here's how we start the pod, of course, with some, the source of all of the happiness and the funny memes in trucking. It's Reddit/truckers. Okay. And I just sent you guys one. It's a little bit of a throwback. Okay. We got Paul Sr. in the typical angry face. No one wants you here. Get out, you scab. The minute a dispatch enters the trucker sub. What do you guys think about that? Can relate? Dispatchers? No, everybody universally hates dispatchers.
Crickets. Yeah, I mean, does everybody?
We work with a lot of dispatchers. I feel like.
Well, I think so. The issue is that,
I'm sorry if the joke is lost on me, but yeah.
Okay, that's fine. See, these guys were fleet owners a little bit before me, right? And I mean, I was a fleet owner a year ago, so certainly there is a disconnect.
It just feels like the dispatchers it's like killing the messenger.
Yeah.
I mean, it just feels like killing them. Like, I know, I get it. Like drivers, I get it. I get that the disconnect there, but it just feels like they're killing the messenger. The dispatcher's just trying to get them to where they gotta go. I mean,
right, but I mean, not always. That's usually the problem because obviously in a limited freight environment, there's how do you do favoritism, right? Like, how do you give one driver a good load, a different driver another load, and I get it. I was a dispatcher before. It's always a challenge, but still, it's just funny because it's on the trucker Reddit truckers page. So that's why it's like, hey, get out of here, you dispatcher, right? So but that's okay, whatever. Not every joke has to land, not every meme is going to be good, okay? But because you guys were on the road, maybe you can't relate to this one, but so another one is the wide variety of food choices at truck stops.
Whoa. Oh, I'm sorry, no driving experience, we're all there. We've all had experienced it, man. I don't understand what you're saying there.
I mean, I would have killed for an Arby's to be honest. I kind of like Arby's. When I was driving, like, I was lucky to break the Carl's Jr. thread, right, or the Subway. Like, those seem to be the two things that were only and always available. In every truck stop. But I don't really get this meme because how am I going to get my truck in?
No, it's just
I don't see anywhere to park.
It's making fun of that there's very few choices at truck stops, and essentially the picture is showing it. It's an old Arby's and a new Arby's, so probably the old one will be torn down or sold or whatever. But it's just funny because it's both Arby's, and it's like that's your trucking food options at truck stops. Two Arby's, McDonald's and McDonald's, Subway and Subway.
No, I need Wendy's at every single truck stop. I don't need variety. I just need Wendy's. That's it.
Right.
That's it.
We'll keep rocking and rolling, okay? And the final one, okay, this is maybe for our FedEx contractors. Obviously they're bobtailing sometimes, but it's like essentially somebody wrote, "Can't lie, this has happened to me at least twice." And it's like SpongeBob doing like a shocked or surprised face. Holy ish, my trailer unhitched on I-95. Oh wait, I'm bobtailing.
I gotta imagine that's gotta be pretty freaky. I could totally see that happening for sure.
Right, definitely. So, anyways, I hope you're entertained and the mood is great because we want to get down to the nitty gritty, the seriousness of the matter, and that is these lawsuits. Okay, companies are constantly getting sued, and no one better to talk to us about lawsuits than Flint. We've done videos about tort reform and on our channel, so those are always good. And I think you found an article. What did you want to talk about, Flint?
Yeah, look, I'm not an attorney, right? Just an industry stakeholder. My wife's actually an attorney and she schools me on this stuff. But Freightwaves article, should there be laws protecting trucking companies from nuclear verdicts? And it goes on to talk about House Study Bill 114. I believe this is in Iowa. Yeah, Iowa. So they're trying to do some tort reform, right? Like I think overall tort reform is like a really good thing. I don't really agree with how this actual bill would work. So it says in here the bill would cap non-economic damages at $1 million if someone tries to sue a case involving a commercial truck driver. Typically non-economic damages is like pain, distress, suffering, whatever, due to the accident. I guess to separate like economic and non-economic damages is an interesting idea. I don't know how you can really separate those things. Like that seems like to me it would be another trial, right? To really try to get that nailed. I'm just thinking like the simplest thing to do if you want to do tort reform is limit the compensation of the accident attorneys. Like, these guys go out and sue a trucking company. They get $100 million verdict of that, or hell, use the average $22 million verdict. Of that, the accident attorney is probably going to take half right into their pocket, right? And like, there's no way that they incurred $11 million in time, labor, research expenses in this trial. I think you limit the accident attorney's take of these cases, and that puts an end to this. Like Iowa's kind of, it seems to me, trying to treat the symptom, but like ultimately that does impact the victim. Like, let's face it, in a lot of these accidents, people are really hurt, and they should probably be able to be compensated for that and sue for that. But the problem is when you tack on the accident attorneys 50%, this thing gets really out of hand, right? And it incents accident attorneys to put billboards all over the countryside and sue for these like really frivolous cases that should never get to court. That's my opinion. But
oh my goodness, a trucker sneezed and now I'm hurt and I don't know how I'll ever drive next to a truck again. So lawsuit.
Right.
It's like but yeah, so and I see Florida and Texas being mentioned here too. And so it seems like people are becoming more aware that this is happening, right? That like there are bigger and bigger lawsuits. I literally a week ago or something, I was reading there's apparently a $900 million lawsuit in Texas from a few years ago. Apparently it was like a Landstar truck or something. I'll pop it up on the screen when I'm editing this thing, but it was absolutely ridiculous. $900 million from a lawsuit. Like, I mean, I get it. Like somebody passed away and it was an elderly person. I understand. What, like, can you put a price on a human's life? No, you cannot. But I'm sure those accident attorneys were happy to get a 900, or half of roughly whatever. They were happy to get a $200, $300, $400 million payday. And I mean, but then again, here's the question: like, how does that actually get paid out? If the trucking business goes bankrupt, like, how does that get paid out? What, like, do we know?
Well, it doesn't, right? That's the thing. I mean, I got advice early in my business career. I was sued as part of a class action lawsuit. And one of the other gentlemen, this is kind of funny, he was the president of Oklahoma State University. It was when I was in school, and they like sued him and a bunch of students in the university. And I was a little worried, right? I was like, I'm a college kid. I don't have any money. Like, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this. And the president of the university was like, here's the secret to lawsuits. He's like, just remain uncollectible. That was his advice, right? So, yeah, I think that the reality is it doesn't. Like, it gets, the insurance company's obviously going to pay, they have to.
Right.
But, and they can, seize assets or whatever if it gets to that point. But, like, at the end of the day, the truck company doesn't have $900 million, it ain't going to happen.
Okay. And so then then is there a necessity for tort reform? If like basically no trucking company could pay out 900 million. I mean, even the biggest trucking companies.
Well, yeah, but it just makes you go out of business, right? It just makes you go out of business, and it makes the cost of insurance so astronomically high.
I think there's definitely a need for it, whether there's a realistic path to it.
That's the thing. I mean, yeah, there's definitely a need. And take it out of trucking specifically, like think about slip strips and falls and like there's just this whole like frivolous lawsuit trend going on where these accident attorneys, they're literally getting rich. And I said this in one of our YouTube videos, Alex. It's like, who has the money to lobby state politicians? Well, it's not the trucking companies, it's the damn accident attorneys, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to follow along to see how, like, you know, it does seem like it's getting a little bit more attention. So it's going to be interesting to follow along to see exactly how this progresses and if there's, you know, anything that comes out of it. But yeah, essentially in this Iowa bill, yeah, like you.
Does the ATA get involved with this?
You know, I think all these organizations are involved, right? I mean, OIDA, ATA. I think everybody wants to see tort reform. It's obviously really good for, you know, for trucking companies, right, and for insurance companies. And the cost of doing business. It's good for everybody,
right? And not to mention, imagine you're a big trucking company, you know, whatever, 1,500 trucks. You get sued for 50, 80, $100 million. What do? You lay off 1,500 drivers plus all the support staff. Like that's a sizable business that now has to shut down because of one freak accident. You know what I mean? Like most trucking companies have generally at that size have a decent safety score. And so it's like, goodness gracious, what are the options there? But yeah, it'll be interesting to follow along. Matt, anything else to add on tort reform or lawsuits or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, so trucking, what is trucking in terms of what it brings, what it controls in freight distribution, in getting products from point A to point B. It's like what? Anything on the shelves of your local store is 90% trucking.
Yeah, like 70% or so is
you know, there's things like tort reform. I've been hearing about it for 20 years plus, and it just gets worse and worse every year, right? And like Flint was saying, I mean, there's not doesn't seem like there's a lot of collective money there to lobby, but there seems like there should be a lot of collective power, you know, where, like, for instance, a trucker strike, something like that. Not recommending that. Definitely don't want to deal with that. Well, but look, know, that kind of thing. I mean, there is a lot of power there. We heard about that last year. So
yeah, and this stuff ultimately hits the consumer, right? When it costs more money to transport goods via higher interest or insurance rates and via these big lawsuits, like.
Right.
That ultimately hits the consumer.
Right. And that's exactly what we need during this high inflationary period, more increased costs because of lawsuits. So yeah, that's an interesting perspective. It's like, because so much of the products does get delivered by trucks, why aren't more people like fighting for tort reform to protect the trucks, I guess. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And Freight Waves, I saw some interesting infographics on the cost of collision, just the statistics for the last couple of years. We all know that roadway fatalities, as a total number, it's been hovering at like 40,000 per year. I've always heard it was like about as many as killed in the entire Vietnam War every year die in traffic collisions. So that number as a rate has been dropping over the last 30 years, but actually it ticked back up according to Freight Waves infographic here. The frequency and the rate of fatalities is actually ticking back up, meaning accidents are getting more severe and causing more deaths per capita. Not a great trend. There's a lot of factors involved, right? I think generally, just again, I was saying this to you before the show, I always want to complain about how bad people are at driving. They are so bad. They go through like a week's long course, or you know, they go through a couple things. They get their driver's license, and they never once get any kind of training. And yet, it's like the truckers are always blamed for any kind of collision if there's a truck versus a passenger vehicle. and just people are just so bad. I don't know what the solution would be, but I just wanted to complain about it. I've said
Right.
before,
And I'm
my
looking.
whole career,
Yeah. Go ahead.
my whole career has been, focused on driver training and best practices. I can't, like I said before, I can't even offer an opinion to someone on their driving habits without them getting angry at me. Yet we have to deal with all these deaths per year because nobody's getting trained in driving.
Right. And I'd want to see, so I'm looking at this thing too. So first it says traffic crashes cost America $340 billion in 2019. And that's 340 billion, like B with a B, like billion. So it's like obviously this is costing America a lot of money, costing America a lot of money, all these accidents. And obviously, like Matt mentioned, it seems like the statistic was going down, and it seems like there's an uptick for some reason. But with these deaths, I'd want to see a distribution of like what age ranges. So it's like what age, like, I mean, obviously, probably more than likely the younger you are, and obviously that's why insurance is expensive, so expensive for young people. Like all of that stuff makes sense. But I would really want to see some numbers behind what deaths are caused at what, like, where out of this 36,000 or so deaths, like what age are you most likely to die in a car accident? I'm sure, like I said, is probably skewed towards the younger, but really that would help paint some clarity on like exactly how this is unfolding, and whether you should like how you could what that would how would that change your behaviors? I don't know, but it would be interesting just to see those numbers.
I think that there's like three interesting, because I dug into not specifically this data source, but some others not too long ago. And there were three things that stood out to me about this crash data at a national level. First is we see decreased fatalities over the last 30 years. And I think that that's primarily driven, and the research says it's primarily driven by safety improvements. If you think 30 years ago, like a car having, like you might have had one airbag, right? Things were square and boxy and steel. And now cars are designed to like roll around you when you crash, right? So like ultimately our technology has improved a lot in our automobiles. The second thing that jumped out at me was just increased traffic volume. If that's kind of the headwind here, like infrastructure in this country has not evolved as fast as traffic counts have increased. And so you've got higher density, higher speed on the roadway. And then I think the third one that I found I didn't actually think about that I thought was really interesting is you see the uptick in 20 and 21. And there's a lot of people that are experts that think that that's COVID related, because what happened during COVID, everybody moved out of cities, right? Everybody, like, why did housing boom so strong? Because people were in confined, like urban cities like Chicago and LA and New York, and they moved out either into the suburbs or into suburbs in other cities, thus creating more of a commute, right? And so the actual vehicle miles increased pretty significantly,
right?
Which I thought was an interesting side effect.
Yeah, which I don't understand at all, because like I was on the road for part of that time, and it doesn't make any sense because like the roads were just totally empty in 2020. And so maybe the really a good chunk of that spike is in 21 when things were starting to open up and the commutes became much longer. So but yeah, it's pretty nuts. Like these it just goes to show you these numbers are ginormous. $340 billion. That's absolutely insane. Matt, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah. I thought Flint touched on something too. So that reduction in the fatality rate was mostly driven by things that happen after the collision, right? Improvements in the vehicle's physics and everything that reduce that impact to the human and protect the life. So maybe we're kind of getting at that, the bottom of that, the potential for those safety improvements from what happens after the collision. So how do we prevent the collision from happening in the first place is where we'd have to go to continue to see a reduction in that rate.
Right. And I was, I'm a fan of Tesla vehicles and whatnot. And I pay attention to their like self-driving tech and how it scores much better on accidents obviously there's a ton of stuff out there, and there's tons of accidents all the time out there too. But like seeing how they pay attention to those metrics as well is also just a very, very interesting insight. And so, but still, let's try to get all off of all this doom and gloom, and we're going to attempt to pivot to something else. And I actually don't have an article or a story or anything, but I do have a question. Okay, and the question for you guys is: if you were to start a trucking company today, what would you do? How would you do it? Okay, Flint, and obviously you had a trucking company. I had a trucking company. And like really, like give me a business model, a business case for a trucking business. And you can't use a cop out and say, oh, I wouldn't start a trucking business. Like let's say everything goes wrong and you do have to start a trucking company. Flint, how do you do it? What's your customer? What's your trailers? Like have you given the starting a trucking company any thought, and how would you do it?
I probably would buy one and not start one.
Okay,
would be my answer, and I would find something that that is majority day, like local or regional, like majority where my drivers are getting home every day for the most part. I would also find something that is highly specialized, whether that is, I wouldn't have a preference really for what it is. It would need to have two things. One, it's not a general commodity, like a general freight market trailer type, like flatbed, dry van, reefer. So none of those.
Okay.
And it would also need to be in a market where it is difficult for an owner operator to compete with me. So it would need some barrier to entry, and whether that is maybe hazmat, or maybe there's some specific customer requirement, right, that I have more of a unique ability to meet than just any one truck owner operator. That's what I would look for. So like some like real world examples, I would avoid, I already said flatbed, dry van, reefer. I would also avoid like end dumps, probably, because anybody with one truck can go buy an end dump. I'd probably avoid corn hoppers, same rule there. I would try to find something in like the tanker, the bulk, potentially, something in that realm is what I would look for.
So very highly specialized, and certainly buy, not build, right? That's kind of the key.
Yeah, I would buy and not build.
Key takeaways. Okay, that's interesting. That's a good answer. Certainly, you're basically positioning right away that like, and obviously because you're the CEO of TruckSpy, you'd want to look for somebody that maybe isn't so technologically advanced, so you could immediately come in there and improve the technology.
Well, that, or I mean, look, the demographics, Alex, are such that baby boomers are selling their businesses in record numbers. They're in a lot of cases a little past when they wanted to retire, but their kids have not wanted to take businesses over. They don't really have a logical heir in a lot of cases, and so there are companies out there that you can acquire. Now, it's going to be more expensive than starting your own from scratch, but you're also going to have volume and net income on day one, and you're going to have a pool of employees and a pool of customers. Valuations probably somewhere in the 4, 5, 6 times free cash flow, something like that.
Good answer. I like it.
Yeah.
Matt, let's go to you. You have to start or buy a trucking business. What do you do? How do you start?
Okay, so I'm not going to be able to follow Flint's act because he's too smart. So I'm going to take this in a different direction. Obviously, the scenario is the apocalypse if I'm starting a trucking company. So first, I want to rewatch Mad Max and see what they did with their fleet. So maybe some cow catchers, mounted machine guns, harpoons. How am I going to protect my fleet as it's out there in the wasteland? So I'll start there. Realistically, though, I think the one thing to redo, I know the first thing I would do is make sure I'd buy like used vehicles. I want to take that Investing in new vehicles, to me, I wouldn't want to go through that again. It's just, I think it would be smarter just with all the wear and tear to start with
I
you.
disagree.
But again, I'm going back just simply to P&D. I mean, so when you're talking about like that last mile delivery, I just remember just the wear and tear on the vehicle just seemed just astronomical. I would at least if I were to start from scratch doing the same thing again, I would probably buy used vans rather than new. But I've already stepped in and see Flint already disagrees. Now I'm already nervous about my rationale. So
Maybe for vans, I don't know. I've always thought my local FedEx P&D guy, if that's what you're thinking of, or Amazon or USPS or whatever, maybe I would go used. I would probably find like old aluminum Grumman step vans with 4BT Cummins engines and no electronics, and just like let the entire neighborhood smell my diesel exhaust as I accelerate as much as 114 horsepower can give me through the neighborhood, right? Like that's probably. But if I'm in the trucking business, I'm buying new trucks. I might buy used trailers if they're in good shape, but I'm definitely buying new tractors for sure.
Right. And again, the key thing that's interesting about both of your guys' answers is, if you've been in trucking, you've gotten familiar with a certain part of it. And so you could kind of leverage the knowledge that you have and like start again and find the advantage, or find what will make your business distinct. And so that was the key thing. And that's actually no different than my answer. So obviously I had a hotshot fleet, and the one thing that I would do differently is I would, like Flint said, super specialized. And so there's this foam insulation board. I don't know if they use it on like commercial buildings. They use it everywhere basically, but foam insulation board, like the max that it weighs is essentially like in between 5,000 and 7,000 pounds. And so a foam insulation board full load, that's what it weighs, 5,000 to 7,000 pounds. But it requires a full 48. And so you can now get trailers, hotshot trailers, that are 48 feet long. They have 48 feet of deck. Okay. And that's legal length, like totally legal. And it would be considered non-CDL. So you don't need a CDL to operate this vehicle. And so the reason I would focus on non-CDL is because it's much easier to find drivers versus, so in your situation, you're finding specialized drivers. You can pay them top dollar because of it, right? But to open a dry van company, not only are you going to be struggling because every owner operator, every Joe Blow can go get a truck and a trailer and compete with you, you're also then struggling to like keep drivers. So it's like, really, that is not a good market to be in. I wholeheartedly agree there. But with non-CDL, right? So then I can pay a little bit under what a CDL driver would make. So they're like that would be my spread essentially. But on top of that, I would have a much bigger pool to choose from. Right. And again, because it's insulation, it's lightweight, it's just tarped and strapped, and it's always like oftentimes it's local delivery. And on top of that, it's unlikely it would get outsourced. The manufacturing would get outsourced because it's just cheaper to bring in the foam as a liquid form or whatever injection, like they inject it between the two panels, they inject it and then they just load it up. So the manufacturing will stay in the US for a long time. So it's not a thing you got to worry about. But yeah, it would be just custom 48-foot non-CDL trailers hauling extremely lightweight loads. Extremely lightweight. And same thing with air conditioning units too, like AC units. Same thing with like the curbs that go under the AC units. All of that stuff is lightweight. There's plenty of factories here in Texas too. So like that would be kind of the competitive advantage that like I would lean into, which is like talk to customers and build, like actually order purpose-built trailers for that. That's kind of what I was thinking. What are your thoughts on that, Flint?
No, that's a great idea. As long as you've got a lock on the trailers and they're hard to get, right? And,
yeah, impossible actually.
Yeah. Well, fabricate your own, right? I mean, look, that's what trash haulers, like, look at the guys that haul, it's tractor trailer, but that haul trash for municipalities. They've got super special built trailers that have compactors on them. And like, it would be really hard to, you either build it, like I think there's one manufacturer and they probably are booked out for 3 years, right? And there is no used market for that. So like, that's the kind of thing that you've got to find.
Right. Right. Well, I also want to hear from you guys, the viewers. Comment below. What do you like? Let's say you've given some thought. You want to start a trucking business. What competitive advantage? Like, how do you start, or how do you buy so that you have that competitive advantage, so that you're not going out of business really quickly, so that you can be profitable. I really want to see those comments and responses, because I feel like this is an interesting topic. Like, we're all smart here. We all have experience in the industry, and it's like, what could we do differently, or maybe what advice could we give? And somebody takes this idea and run with it. Hey, by all means, you know what I mean? Like, the good for you. So obviously none of us are going to go out and start trucking businesses, but that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for stopping by. I think this was a good one. Matt, Flint, thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you next week. Bye.